Chapter 4. Stendar's Grace. Velkyre drifted upward through a darkness that felt thicker than any mountain night he had ever known. There was no pain at first, only a vast, weightless quiet, as though the world itself had decided to hold its breath. Then the visions came, not as dreams but as something older and far more deliberate, carved into the fabric of his mind with the same inexorable force that had once shaped the throat of the world. He stood upon a plain of endless ash beneath a sky the color of old iron. Before him stretched the whole of Nirn. Every hold and every hidden valley laid bare like a map drawn in blood and starlight. Creatures of the night crawled across it in countless numbers, vampires, with eyes like dying coals, werewolves whose howls still echoed from the last age, and behind them the greater shadows, the Daedric princes themselves, vast and patient, their influence seeping into every crack of mortal life. Over it all hung a single, unblinking presence, not the golden cruelty of the Thalmor, nor the silver fanaticism of the Hand, but something colder and cleaner. Stendar, the god of mercy and justice, the one who judged the unworthy and shielded the weak. A voice that was not a voice spoke into the marrow of his bones. Rid Nirn of the unholy, cleanse the night, burn out every last creature that feeds on fear and blood, and when the lesser darknesses are gone, turn your gaze upon the princes themselves. An impossible task. A lifetime, no, many lifetimes of war without end. Yet the will is given, the path is set. Rise and walk it. The vision did not ask, it simply was. Clarity arrived like a blade drawn across fog. The mountaineers, the vampire in the Blackwoods, the silver hand in Rorikstead, the Hagraven's garden, the ebony figure on the distant rise, all of it had been leading here. Not to the citadel alone, but to something far larger and far more merciless. Then the vision shattered. Light crashed inward. Warmth, pure, golden, and almost unbearable, flooded every burned and broken place in his body. Restoration. Magic, thick and insistent, poured through muscle and bone like molten sunlight. The raw flesh of his face and arm knit with a sensation that hovered between agony and ecstasy. Blistered skin cooled, cracked ribs settled. The deep, grinding exhaustion that had dragged him into blackness loosened its grip, one reluctant finger at a time. Voices rose around him in overlapping waves, prayers spoken in the rough Nordic cadence of the Reach's edge, some halting, some fierce, all of them aimed at whatever divines still listened in an occupied land. He felt the weight of many gazes, the collective held breath of an entire village that had already begun to mourn. His eyes opened. A Breton woman stood over him, both hands outstretched, pale blue light still flowing from her palms in steady, controlled streams. She was perhaps 40, with the composed features of someone who had spent years learning exactly how much magic a broken body could accept before it rejected the gift. Her robes were simple, travel-stained grey, marked only by a small silver amulet of Stendar at her throat. Sweat beaded along her hairline from the prolonged casting, yet her expression remained calm, almost stern, as though healing a man who had just walked out of a burning Hagraven's den was simply another duty on a long list. "Easy," she murmured, voice low and precise. "The worst is closed. Do not try to rise yet." Lena was on his left side, both of her hands locked around his unburned forearm with a desperation that bordered on pain. Her wheat-colored braid had come half undone. Dirt and ash streaked one cheek. Her eyes were red-rimmed and shining, fixed on his face as though she feared that looking away for even a heartbeat would let him slip back into the dark. When she saw him truly awake, a broken sound escaped her half-sob, half-laugh, and she pressed her forehead briefly against his wrist, shoulders shaking. "You're here," she whispered. "You're actually here." Beyond them, the room resolved into crowded, breathless focus. Nearly every soul in Rorikstead who could stand had somehow pressed into the small chamber of the Frostfruit Inn or hovered in the open doorway. The miller Rorik stood nearest the foot of the bed, cap clenched in both hands, eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. His wife hovered behind him, one hand over her mouth. The flour-dusted cook from the kitchens, the two boys who had peered from behind their mother's skirts days earlier, the elderly grandmother with her bone-knitting needles now still in her lap, farmers with soil still under their nails, the innkeeper and his daughter, even the quiet blacksmith from the edge of the village. They filled every available space, some kneeling, some standing with heads bowed, all of them watching the man they had carried back from the smoking ruin of a witch's garden, as though his continued breathing were a small miracle they had not dared to expect. No one spoke above a murmur. The air itself seemed thickened by the weight of their hope and their prayers. Outside the half-shuttered window, the afternoon light of Rorikstead continued, ordinary and unaware. Travelers still moved along the road. Imperial patrols still rode their routes. The Thalmor still watched from their distant posts. The Silver Hands still hunted. The greater darknesses of Nirn still stirred in crypts and ruins in the spaces between stars. The world had not yet realized that Velkyre Rateborn still lived. The people in this room knew. But, and for the first time since the vision had burned itself into his mind, Velkyre understood that the impossible task Stendarr had set before him would not begin on some distant battlefield. It had already begun here, in a crowded inn room filled with the quiet, stubborn hope of ordinary souls who had simply refused to let him die. Velkyre lay still for a long time after the first rush of restoration magic had passed. He did not speak. He did not try to rise. He simply breathed, slow and deliberate, and allowed the golden light that still lingered in his flesh to finish its quiet work. The worst of the burns, those angry, weeping places where hag-riven fire had kissed skin and steel alike, cooled by degrees. The tight, shiny pull of half-healed blisters eased. The deep ache in his ribs settled into something dull and distant. Even the raw places along his arm and the side of his neck, where the armor had glowed red and the wax had run like molten tears, began to feel less like open wounds and more like the memory of wounds. The magic did not hurry. It sank root deep, knitting what fire and silver and claw had tried to unmake, until the only heat left in his body was the ordinary warmth of blood moving through living flesh. All the while remained at his side. She had not released his arm. If anything, her grip had grown more careful, more constant, as though she feared that the slightest loosening might let him slip away again. Her free hand moved in small, unconscious motions, smoothing the edge of the blanket, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, adjusting the pillow behind his shoulders with the soft sounds of someone tending a creature they had already decided belonged to them. Every so often she murmured something too quiet for anyone else to hear, fragments of relief, half-formed promises, the soft nonsense that rises when the heart has been clenched too long and finally begins to unclench. Around them, the crowded room had become a low, living tide of gratitude. Voices rose and fell in overlapping currents. Some thanked Stendarr by name, the syllables careful and almost defiant. Others spoke to Mara, to Kaini, to the old unnamed spirits of field and ford that the hold had never quite forgotten. A few simply pressed their palms together and whispered wordless thanks to whatever force had seen fit to return the burned stranger to them. Soft laughter broke out here and there, relieved, almost giddy, as the reality settled that the man they had carried from the smoking garden was not going to die in the Frostfruit Inn after all. Someone produced a skin of the apple wine the miller's wife still made in secret. Cups were passed. Shoulders were clasped. The blacksmith wiped his eyes with the back of one soot-stained hand and pretended he had only been rubbing away smoke. The Breton woman finally lowered her hands. The last threads of pale blue light faded from her palms like mist burned off by morning sun. She straightened, rolling her shoulders once to ease the stiffness of prolonged casting, and looked down at Velkyre with the calm assessment of a healer who had seen far worse and expected to see worse still before her road ended. When she spoke, her voice carried the soft, measured cadence of high rock tempered by years of travel through harder lands. "I am Sister Ilara," she said, "a pilgrim of Stendar. I walk where the winds of mercy lead me, and I bring what light I can to places that have grown too accustomed to the dark. I have done so for more years than I care to count." Her gaze rested on him without curiosity or demand. "This meeting is no accident. Stendar does not waste the steps of those who serve him, nor the suffering of those in his wake. I do not know what he has shown you. I do not need to know. The details belong to you alone. What I do know is this: those who follow his light without abandon are given purpose. Each purpose different in scale, each different in the weight it demands. Some are called to shield a single household, others are called to stand against the night itself. The size of the task is not the measure. The refusal to compromise it is." She leaned forward slightly, enough that the silver amulet at her throat caught the afternoon light. "Men and mare are fallible. We are proud. We are easily turned by fear, by gold, by the sweet poison of believing our own judgment superior to the will that set us on the path. I have watched good souls become the very darkness they once swore to oppose because they decided the vision could be improved, or delayed, or shared with those who only wished to use it. Do not let that happen to you. Keep what Stendar has placed in your heart close. Let no one, friend, lover, or lord, dilute it or redirect it for their own ends. Stay true, even when the true road is the one that leaves you walking alone." Ilara straightened fully and settled her travel-stained cloak around her shoulders with the practiced motion of someone an ex-journey in her mind. "I am needed elsewhere in this vast and hostile world. There are always more who require Stendar's mercy than there are hands to carry it. You will not see me again, I think. That is as it should be." She offered him the smallest of nods, not farewell, but acknowledgement. "Walk the path, and may the light you carry prove brighter than the shadows that will try to extinguish it." She turned without further ceremony and moved through the crowded room. Villagers parted for her with quiet respect. The door closed behind her with a soft final sound. The moment she was gone, Lena's restraint collapsed entirely. She surged forward as though the pilgrim's departure had removed the last invisible barrier between them. Both arms wrapped around Velkyre's shoulders, careful of the still tender places yet fierce in their need. Her face pressed into the side of his neck. The words that spilled out of her were a breathless, overlapping flood gratitude, fear, the leftover terror of watching him burn and fall, the fierce joy of feeling his heart still beating under her hands. She held him as though she could physically anchor him to the world by the strength of her embrace alone, nearly smothering him against the soft warmth of her cheek and the scent of wood smoke and apple that clung to her hair. "Don't you ever do that again," she whispered fiercely into his skin. "Don't you dare. I thought when the house was burning and you didn't come out, and then you did, but you were on fire, and then you just stopped. I thought the divines had taken you after all. Don't leave me like that. Not after everything. Not after I followed you all that way just to give you..." The rest dissolved into another tight, almost desperate squeeze. as though she could press the promise of his continued survival into his very bones by sheer force of will. The jars continued their quiet celebration, but for the moment the only world that existed for Lena was the solid breathing fact of the man she refused to let go. Velkyre lifted his free hand with deliberate care and rested it against the back of Lena's head, fingers sliding gently into the half-undone wheat-colored braid. "Easy," he murmured, the word rough from smoke and disuse. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere just yet. Breathe with me." He kept his voice low and steady, the same tone he had once used to calm spooked horses in the high passes when thunder rolled too close. His thumb moved in slow arcs behind her ear while the rest of him remained carefully still, giving her the solid fact of his presence without encouraging the desperate tightness of her hold. Inside his own body, the world was still rearranging itself. The residual gold of Sister Alara's magic continued to settle into muscle and nerve like warm water finding every crack in dry earth. Sounds that had been muffled now arrived with sharp edges. The soft crackle of the hearth, the distant mooing of cattle beyond the village, the uneven rhythm of many people trying not to breathe too loudly in a small room. Light through the half-shuttered window felt almost too bright after the darkness of unconsciousness and the green-tinged horror of the Hagraven's basement. Even the simple weight of the blanket across his legs required a moment of reacquaintance, as though his skin had forgotten ordinary sensations in the furnace of the garden. Lena's sobs gradually softened into hitching breaths. She did not release him, but the crushing quality of the embrace eased enough that he could draw a fuller lungful of air. Her forehead remained pressed to the side of his neck, warm and damp. It was Rorik who finally intervened. The miller crossed the short distance from the foot of the bed with the careful tread of a man who had spent a lifetime with the Caregile things, millstones, children, and now a daughter who looked ready to break if handled wrongly. He laid one broad, work-roughened hand on Lena's shoulder. "Come, girl," he said, voice gentle but firm. "Let the man have a little room to remember he's alive. You've held him together long enough for the rest of us to see it with our own eyes. There'll be time for more words later." Lena resisted for a heartbeat, then allowed herself to be drawn back. She wiped her face with the heel of one hand, leaving a streak of ash and tears across her freckles, and settled onto the stool beside the bed instead, close enough that her knee still brushed the mattress, but no longer draped across him like a living shield. One by one the villagers approached. Rorik spoke first, voice thick. He thanked Velkyre for the axe that had stopped a silver blade from ending his life, and for the fire that had ended a witch who had preyed on the western roads for longer than most in the village cared to admit. The blacksmith came next, turning a small iron charm over and over in his scarred fingers before pressing it into Velkyre's palm, a crude but carefully made token of Stendar's hammer, still warm from the forge. The flour-dusted cook from the kitchens offered a promise of fresh bread whenever he passed through again, and a muttered prayer that the divines keep the road kinder than it had been. The elderly grandmother simply took his unburned hand between both of hers and held it for a long moment in silence, her bow needles forgotten in her lap. The two boys, suddenly shy, mumbled thanks for making the scary silver men go away, before their mother steered them out. Even the quietest among them found something to say. A farmer who had watched the lightning fall, a woman whose sister had once vanished on the same stretch of road where the Hagraven's house had stood, the innkeeper who had given up his best room without hesitation. Each gratitude was accepted with a small nod or a quiet word. Velkyre met every pair of eyes, letting the weight of their relief settle into him alongside the lingering magic. It took time. The room emptied by slow degrees until the only sounds left were the hearth, the soft creak of settling timber, and Lena's uneven breathing beside him. When the door finally closed on the last of them, the silence felt larger than the chamber that contained it. Lena did not wait long. She leaned forward again, both hands curling around the edge of the mattress as though she needed the anchor. Her voice had steadied, but the fierce undercurrent remained. "Take me with you," she said. "I know you refused before. I know the road is dangerous. But I've already walked it once to find you. I can do it again. I'll cook. I'll keep watch. I'll bind your wounds the way Sister Alara showed me while she worked. I'll carry packs or stay silent for days if that's what the road needs. I'll give you anything you ask, company. Care. The last of the apple wine my mother still hides. Whatever would make the nights less heavy. Just don't leave me here to wonder every time a traveler comes through whether you're still breathing somewhere under the same sky." Velkyre met her gaze and held it. He did not look away when her eyes shone. He did not soften the truth to make it easier to swallow. "No," he said, quiet and absolute. "And this time I need you to hear why." He shifted higher against the pillows, testing the healed places, and let the full weight of what he had seen both in the flesh and in the vision settle into his voice. "The world beyond these fields is not simply dangerous, Lena. It is hungry. There are things in it that do not merely kill. They collect. Vampires who smile and speak of welcome while they measure the worth of a beating heart. Hagravens who turn kindness into a leash. Daedric whispers that find the soft places in a soul and press until something breaks. Men in silver who believe the only clean world is one scrubbed free of everything they fear. And elves in gold who will burn a village to preserve an order that serves them alone. All of them understand one truth better than most of the living ever will. The surest way to break a steadfast man is not to strike him. It take the one soft thing he has left and hold it where he can suffer." He paused, giving the words time to reach her. "You are that soft thing to me already, whether I wished it or not. If you walk the road at my side, every enemy I make will see you as the shortest path to my knees. They will not need to defeat me. They will only need to reach you, and I have already been shown a path that will make me more enemies than any one life should carry. I will not hand them the weapon that could turn me aside from it. I will not watch you become the price of my purpose." Lena's mouth oozed again. The protest that had been rising died under the steady, unflinching weight of what he had laid out. Tears still stood in her eyes, but something harder and sadder had begun to take their place, understanding, unwilling and incomplete, yet real. Velkyre reached out and covered one of her hands with his own, the touch brief and final. "Stay," he said, "live. Keep the door open and the porridge hot, the way you promised. That is the only gift I will accept from you. Everything else would cost more than either of us can pay." Velkyre drew a slow breath and began to rise. The healed places pulled only faintly now, a distant reminder rather than a command to remain still. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and set his bare feet on the worn floorboards, testing the solidity of the world one careful shift of weight at a time. The residual gold of Sister Alara's magic still hummed quietly beneath his skin, but the deeper knowledge of the vision sat heavier, still an unyielding axis around which every future step would have to turn. He dressed without haste. The dark steel breastplate settled across his shoulders with the familiar grim embrace of an old companion that had already survived fire and silver and claw. He fastened the straps by feel, fingers moving through motions learned long before any god had spoken into the dark behind his eyes. The heavy cloak, what remained of it after the garden's flames followed, its scorched edges stiff against his neck. He slung the quiver of red-fletched arrows into place, felt the weight of the axe settle against his hip, and finally drew on his boots. Each piece of gear returned him a little further to the man who had walked out of the Gerals and into the long, bloody road that now stretched ahead. Lena had not spoken since he finished explaining the hunger of the world. She sat on the stool in absolute silence, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on some middle distance beyond the far wall. The only movement was the slow rise and fall of her breathing, and the occasional small flex of her fingers, as though she were physically holding words inside her chest. He crossed the room. His hand reached for the latch of the door. That was when she moved. Lena surged up from the stool and caught his wrist before the iron could lift, her grip fierce enough to still him mid-motion. When she looked up, the earlier tears had burned away into something brighter and more dangerous resolve, edged with the kind of desperate hope that refused to die quietly. "Promise me you'll come back," she said. The words were low, almost steady, but they carried the full weight of everything she had not said since he refused her a second time. "Not as a maybe, not as a kindness to keep me quiet. Promise me." Velkyre looked down at her and felt the path Stender had set like a blade already pressed to the future. He feared the truth of what waited if the winds ever turned him toward Rorikstead again. Had not been a gentle suggestion. It had been a forging. Every step he took from this moment would draw the attention of things that preferred the night unchallenged. If he returned to these fields, it might not be as a man walking under open sky, but as something hunted, or broken, or carrying a war that would not care what quiet lives stood in its way. The purpose had already begun to move. To halt it even for a day, to linger, to soften, to let the heart override the will felt like the first small ruin from which larger ones would inevitably grow. He turned his hand within her grasp until his fingers could close lightly around hers. "I cherish what you are here," he said, voice quiet and unflinching. "The way you keep the porridge hot and the door open. The way you followed a burned stranger into a witch's garden because your heart would not let you do otherwise. That is no small thing in a land that has taught most people to look away. If the purpose I have been given ever reaches its end, if the night is ever quieter and the road no longer demands every breath I have, then yes, I would like to return and sit at your table and learn what peace feels like when it is not simply the absence of immediate danger. I would like that more than I can easily say." He did not give her the clean promise she wanted. He could not. Lena searched his face for a long moment. Whatever she found there seemed to settle something inside her rather than break it. A small, fierce smile touched her mouth, half acceptance, half defiance. Before he could speak again, she rose onto her toes, caught the front of his scorched cloak in one hand and kissed him. It was not hesitant. It was a claim, brief and certain, tasting of salt and apple and the stubborn refusal to let the future have the final word. At the same time, her other hand found his and slid a cool band of silver onto his finger, the gift she had carried all the way from Rorikstead, the one she had meant to give him in a quieter moment that the Hagraven's house had stolen. The metal settled against his skin with a soft finality, simple and unadorned, yet heavier than its size suggested. She drew back only far enough to speak, her breath still warm against his mouth. "You will be back," she said, bold and absolute. "For better or worse, and when you are, I will be more than ready. For any challenge, any threat, any darkness that thinks it can follow you through that door. With you around, we'll always have someone standing between them and the worst of the world." A flicker of lighter humor crossed her face, soft but genuine. "And I will be ready to assist with anything once the occasion arises again. Cooking, bandages, distracting golden-armored nuisances, whatever the road has taught you to need." She locked eyes with him for a long, unblinking moment, as though she meant to burn the sight of him into memory the way the vision had burned itself into his. Then she stole a second kiss quicker, fiercer, before releasing him entirely. Lena turned and bolted through the open door, the sound of her boots rapid on the stairs, leaving Velkyre alone in the quiet room, with the silver ring cool against his finger and the long road northwest already calling him forward.